Hello and welcome to another episode of the Best You interview series. It's Gary here again. Thank you, as always, for taking the time to join me. And today I'm joined by doctor, author, and TEDx speaker, Dr. Emilio Justo, who is here to discuss his journey as a Cuban immigrant through to the success and messages that he teaches others today. Born in Communist Cuba, he and his parents immigrated to the US as refugees when he was 3 years old. And despite facing discrimination and poverty, Dr. Justo has received sustained success, proving that a lack of privilege is not an obstacle to attaining abundance and success. Since 1989, Dr. Justo has specialised in general ophthalmology and cosmetic surgery. He's renowned for his state-of-the-art refractive cataract surgery, and I'm probably going to get this word wrong, blepharoplasty, something.
Blepharoplasty, you're very
Oh,
close. Very good.
almost close.
Blepharoplasty.
And
Yes.
we'll find out a bit more about that. And having performed over 50,000 such procedures, Dr. Justo is a two-time and counting TEDx speaker, thought leader, and master teacher on delayed gratification, resilience, and the obsession advantage. Dr. Justo's first TEDx talk, Delayed Gratification, Your Superpower to Success, is ranked number 3 in the world in 2023. That's incredible. Dr. Justo is now the best-selling author of The Power of Pause, Mastering Delayed Gratification for Success, a blueprint for resilience and enduring fulfillment. Dr. Justo, thank you very, very much for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thank you so very much, Gary. It's really a delight and pleasure to join you here. So I'm greatly looking forward to it.
Me too, me too. So, as I detailed on the bio there, you've had quite the journey in terms of your life. So let's start at the beginning. Can you share a bit more about your journey from your immigration, as much as you can remember about it or has been told to you after the fact, and to becoming a successful medical practitioner at quite an early age too, I may add.
Certainly, Gary. Well, my parents and I are Cuban refugees, and we left communist Cuba when I was just about 3.5, almost 4 years old. And unlike most Cuban refugees who stereotypically come via Miami, Florida, we actually left and fled through Mexico.
Right.
And we were in Mexico for 6 months. And then back in the mid 1960s, there were many church organizations that were sponsoring Cuban refugees' entry into the United States. That was the legal way to do it back then.
Yeah.
And so my parents and I were sponsored by a church in Gary, Indiana, close to Chicago. And for those of you who are old enough, you'll remember Gary, Indiana was the home of Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5.
There you
So
go.
when we arrived there, that's when they were getting their first start, actually. My grandparents fled Cuba a few months later, and their church organization that sponsored them settled them into a small college town in Missouri called Tarkio College, Missouri. Now, growing up, with nothing, I mean, we came over with literally just the clothes on our back. So
Yeah.
when we got to Indiana, my father was working 2 full-time jobs. He worked as a steel worker at U.S. Steel, and then he also did all the maintenance and janitorial at the church that sponsored us. My mother, who actually had her doctorate in education from the University of Havana, of course, her credentials did not transfer coming from a communist country.
Mm.
So she relocated 3 hours south to Bloomington, Indiana, to Indiana University to restudy all over again. So my father was working 2 full-time jobs. My mother was away studying. And so my parents made the difficult decision to have me move to Missouri to grow up with my grandparents from kindergarten through the end of 4th grade. And it was really an incredible experience because we lived in a dorm room right on the college campus. My grandfather worked as an accountant for the college, and it was really great. I was surrounded by college students all the time.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful experience. Then starting in 5th grade, my parents had gotten established enough and had saved some money that they were able to purchase a home a little south of Gary, Crown Point, Indiana. And so that's when we all moved back to Indiana to get together. Then I spent my growing up years in Crown Point, Indiana, and I have some stories I can certainly share about high school and some trials and tribulations. And I had a bit of a medical crisis that really set my path forward in terms of this whole concept of not only delayed gratification, but also resilience and obsession. That was my second TEDx talk on the power of obsession. And ultimately, I was blessed. I worked my butt off in high school. I became valedictorian. I then was accepted as one of 10 national applicants into the University of Michigan's medical program, which was an accelerated program. So I finished high school at the age of 17. I finished medical school at the age of 23. I then did my 4 years of residency training in ophthalmology and oculoplastic surgery. And at the tender age of 27, I moved from Washington, D.C., where I did my training, to sunny Phoenix, Arizona, which is where I have been and continue to be. And here I am in my 36th year of practice, still practicing full time, loving every minute of it. And here we are.
Fantastic. What an incredible story. And just the sacrifices and hardships that must have been part of the decision to leave, the stop off in Mexico, the finally arriving, the if we're going to make a real go of this, these are the options that are open to us for right now. Having the family come over, it's incredible to hear it as part of a story. It must have been even more impactful to live it, has definitely shaped, your approach to life, your work ethic, and the areas of concentration for you. So you briefly mentioned earlier there, Dr. Julio, the Dr. Justus, I should say, the hardships that you went through and some of the medical challenges that presented themselves to you, which became the foundation for a lot of things going on in your life. I'd love to hear a bit more about that, please.
Sure. Well, interesting. Let me just go back for a quick moment. In Cuba, it's interesting. My parents always told me this story time and time again growing up, that when Castro took over, right, as a communist country, I mean, he took over everything. He took over homes, he took over businesses. My father had a small shoe store. At the end of a day of work, when he had already locked up, he heard a banging at the front door. Looked through the window. There were troops there with machine guns. Wasn't sure what to do. He ended up opening the door, and they put a machine gun to his face and just politely said, "Hand over the keys." And that was it. And in a blink of an eye, he had, sacrificed his business to communism.
Yeah.
Similarly, with our home, when Castro took over, he actually took over people's homes and he subdivided them so that in our home, which was a meager home, but he subdivided it so that 3 other families would also be living in the same home. And one of the first things Castro did was he mandated a currency exchange where he had everyone go to their local bank to turn in their currency for a new currency that he had created, which of course had little to no value. My father, who always distrusted Castro from the beginning, chose to bury his money in the backyard. And the reason that's important, and I'm sharing this story, is it's because of that money that he buried in the backyard that a year or so later, my father had befriended a Canadian diplomat, and he was able to use that money that still had value because it was the original Cuban currency. He was able to purchase tickets on the black market to flee through Mexico. And that's why we left through Mexico as things turned out. So it's kind of interesting. I hear these stories growing up, and it's almost hard to really appreciate it unless you're really going through it. And I was so young that, of course, I don't have those specific memories, but it had to be a very, very difficult and challenging time
Yeah.
for my parents to make that decision to leave everything behind purely on the hope of a better future in the United States. It wasn't just about survival. It really became what I would say a powerful metaphor for the concept of delayed gratification. I mean, that's really what started that journey of delayed gratification.
Yeah.
Um, and then in high school, as I was saying, in the middle of my freshman year, I did have what I would consider certainly a medical crisis. And two things happened. Number one, I was developing one of the most severe cases of what is known as acne conglobata. This is not your normal run-of-the-mill teenage acne. This is a very rare, serious type of acne. And I was under the care of a dermatologist and had been, and it continued to get worse and worse. I remember to this day, I would be sitting in the classroom and my face would literally, I'm not exaggerating, would be dripping with pus running down my face. And, you can only imagine as a freshman in high school, the embarrassment with your classmates and girls and
Yeah.
your teachers and everything else. But then on top of that, I developed this fever that did not go away. And I had it for over a month. Finally, I was hospitalized in Chicago at Northwestern University, and all the doctors started trying to do all sorts of tests. I went through scan after scan, bone marrow biopsies. I mean, it was just horrific. And the doctors thought that they were looking for some sort of insidious cancer inside of me causing the fever.
Mhm.
But after weeks of testing, it was determined that the root cause of my fever of unknown origin was the severe acne conglobata. So
Oh.
ultimately, this resulted in 3 surgeries while being hospitalized for 2.5 months during my freshman year of high school. And this was an hour away from home. And one of my parents would take turns driving back and forth and picking up homework for me. And there I was lying in a hospital bed and doing the best that I could to keep up with homework. Because remember, back in that day, Zoom didn't
Yeah.
exist. We didn't have this virtual learning the way we have now.
Yeah.
Um, so it was a challenging time. And of course, after being discharged home after 2.5 months and finally being free of fever, but I was scarred forever.
Mhm.
And that just became part of who I was, who I am, still is, and really I learned to just push through it and not let it affect my self-esteem. I had a very, very active social life. I was involved in all sorts of school clubs. I dated girls. I was very super active in athletics,
Mhm.
um, and ultimately, even missing all that school. I worked extremely hard in high school. I joke to my friends, but it's really not a joke. It's the honest truth that I worked much harder in high school than I worked in medical school. And that ultimately paid off. Again, part of the delayed gratification, all that
Yeah.
work paid off. And that's how I ultimately got accepted into this special program at the University of Michigan, which really set the stage for greater things later in life.
Yeah, definitely. And in terms of the medical profession, was that a dream and a goal for you from a young age? And was there a specific reason? Was it based on your experiences that you personally had had in terms of your medical challenges?
Well, Gary, that's a great question. That's a super common question I get all the time. And my best honest answer is I really don't think so. Maybe subconsciously somehow, but truly growing up, even before my medical issues, I was always very interested and I think very gifted in math and science. I mean, it came, I worked hard, but it came relatively easy for me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, medicine is probably the path to go. I was exploring other things like any other teenager. I remember doing some drive arounds in police cars, thinking, okay, what would law enforcement look like?
Yeah.
So I mean, I investigated different things, but really, what I was thinking about in high school is, I hate to use a stereotype, but being Cuban, I was super, super talented in baseball. I mean, I love baseball. Baseball was my passion. I mean, I played every sport, but baseball was really the number one sport.
Yeah,
And I was a pitcher, and when I wasn't pitching, I was catching.
yeah,
And I thought there for a while, hey, I'd like to go into professional baseball. But then I remember distinctly one Sunday afternoon, I met with my parents, who I adored and respected immensely, and one of their friends who had helped my parents during this transition into the United States.
mhm,
We sat around the kitchen table and just talked about things. And being very logical, they just explained to me that, hey, statistically speaking, you might make it in baseball, but the chances are so far less than if you just take a more traditional path and do whatever you want to do, whether it's medicine or something else,
yeah,
and you'll be successful that way as well. So I thought about it, and I thought, gosh, I mean, they're absolutely correct. And
mhm,
so I just made the conscious choice that I was going to stick with medicine. And I've never looked back, other than the fact that one of my high school classmates, who was also a pitcher, did actually play in professional baseball for a number of years. I mean, he wasn't super well known. He
yeah,
kind of bounced around from different teams, um, so I always do have that little voice inside of me saying, "Well, gosh, if my fellow teammate made it, maybe I could have made it." But
yeah,
nonetheless, in life, there's many decisions and there's many forks in the road, and making one decision over another doesn't mean that you're sacrificing and giving up on something else.
yeah,
It's just that one has to use his or her best judgment at the time, weighing all the different factors in terms of what decision to make. And I made the let's call it the traditional medical decision to go
yeah.
into medicine, and I've loved it, and it's served me well. And I'm blessed to have had thousands and thousands of patients over the years that have depended on me, and I've treated all these patients to the best of my ability as an extended part of my family.
Mhm.
And so it's been a good journey. So I have absolutely zero regrets. So I'm sorry
And
for the long-winded answer to your
oh
question.
no, it's a brilliant answer because there's so many things to unpack there, and the one main thing you just hit upon it at the end there is the ability to make the best decision that you can at the time. And even if you still have a pang of what if only, who knows, what you would say to yourself as a future version of yourself. But the ability to look back and say, I consulted the people I respect most. We had an adult, logical conversation about it. I got the chance to make my own decision. And then I made it based on the factors that were in play at the time. Not everyone gets an opportunity to do that in life, let alone at a formative age where that's really going to genuinely map out what the rest of your life does. So I can even feel it as you're saying that, in terms of the no regrets and where you're at. So that's such a powerful decision making lesson for folks to say, seek out people that want to have a conversation, who care about you, who will be biased in some way, shape, or form, but ultimately they want what's best for you. And if what's best for you is a path that they wouldn't take, that's okay. I don't know obviously what the conversations at the kitchen table were, but I just love that inherent, deep rooted logical, respect, love-driven approach, which is, freed you to be able to say, this is what I'm doing, this is why, and then going full bore into that.
Yes, and again, I keep saying this, but sincerely, I've just been truly blessed in so many aspects of my life. But being an only child, because by choice with my parents, when we came over from Cuba, they didn't want to have a large family, not having any money.
Yeah.
But I was surrounded by love, 24/7, and and
Yeah.
and I know that they loved me and they supported me in everything that I did, and I felt it, and that just really helped me in all aspects of life.
Yeah.
Um, and as far as making the choices, my personality has always been that I rarely, if ever, throughout my life, have had regrets about anything. And trust me, I've made horrific decisions that have cost me in so many different ways, whether it be on a personal level, on
Yeah.
professional levels, financial levels. I mean, I've made every mistake there is to make, and I think continue to do so at times. But but I really do look at those mistakes and I try to learn from them, and I try to embrace that failure and look at it. Uh, just that temporary setback is really what I call a temporary step back, which allows me to bounce forward
Yes.
with obsession at my next challenge. So I don't look back at things and say, oh, I would have, I could have, I should have.
Mhm.
No, I mean, whatever's in the past is in the past. I live pretty much in the moment, a
Yeah.
little bit in the future. I certainly have goals and dreams,
Yeah.
but primarily I live in the moment, and I
Yeah.
certainly don't live in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. So, with all that, you have an accumulation of life experience, of course, life success, career success, and that then takes you to some of the bigger stages in the world. And I do want to talk about the TEDx work that you've done thus far. But before we get there, we have some common geographic nuance to the very first time that you were informed that you were making that you were good that you made it to the TEDx stage. And you were kind enough to share this with me prior to recording. I'd love for the listeners to hear this story. So, for preface of this story, I'm in Calgary in Canada, and I'll pass it over to Dr. Justo.
Yes. So basically, in a nutshell, I had been counseled as I was applying, and boy, in this application process for the TEDx, it's fairly time intensive
Mhm.
and exhaustive. But on average, it takes 90 applications to land a talk. On
Mhm.
average, I mean, you might land it sooner, you might land it later,
Mhm.
but that's the average. So I had started this application process around April of last year of 2023. And I was devoting every weekend. I mean, I didn't have time during the week because my work week is too long. But every weekend, I would devote every spare minute to doing applications. And I'm counting them, I'm putting them on a spreadsheet. And
Yeah.
so I finally got to 86 applications I had submitted. And then it was time to take our yearly family vacation, which at particular time we were going to do a trip of Western Canada.
Yeah.
And so, we started in Vancouver, and then we went over to Alberta, and went to Lake Louise, and then we landed at Banff. And remember, it's July 5th. I
Yeah.
remember that day, and we're having lunch outdoors in a restaurant at Banff, which is beautiful, as you know, Gary.
Yeah.
And I get this phone call, and I decide to answer it, and it was basically giving me the opportunity to speak at TEDx Cherry Creek HS, which is basically just outside of Denver, Colorado.
Right.
And at the time of the phone call, the talk was going to be in exactly 5 weeks. Now, understand that at the time, the way I had been instructed on preparing for this TEDx is for the applications, you just have kind of a global theme with bullet points laid out.
Yeah.
You make a 1 minute selfie video that most organizations want you to send in, but you don't have the talk written.
Hmm.
So here it is, I have 5 weeks, and I'm thinking, okay, I wasn't going to turn down the talk, right? There's just no way I was going to turn it down.
Yeah.
So I figured, okay, I have another week of vacation still with my family. So nothing's going to happen during vacation. And then by the time I get back home, I'm going to have 4 weeks. And within 4 weeks, I have to write the talk. I have to practice the talk.
Yeah.
I have to memorize the talk. And then I finally have to deliver the talk.
Yeah.
So it was a little stressful because that's a lot to do in 4 weeks for those
Yeah.
who haven't gone through the process. Trust me, that's a very compressed time schedule.
Yeah.
But we delivered it, and I was very happy with the way it went. And then I was very fortunate because the other thing I learned is that once you do the TEDx talk, which these talks are recorded, usually professionally recorded,
Mhm.
that it can take many months in some cases. I mean, even up to 6 months for the video, for the TED organization to publish the video on their YouTube channel.
Right.
In other cases, it can be relatively quick. So it can be anywhere from 1 to 6 months on average.
Yeah.
And in my first talk, it actually got published within like 5 or 6 weeks, which was incredible.
Yeah.
And that talk really then just started taking off, and I mean, incredibly so. I mean, I had no idea. Neither did my wife. I mean, we were looking at this thinking, what's going on? And currently, I just happened to look a couple days ago in preparation for our meeting today,
Yeah.
and it has gauging towards 6.5 million. It's a little shy of 6.5 million views. So I'm very proud of that, and ultimately that led to my wife suggesting a few months after that talk, saying, "Hey, you should write a book." And I'd never written a book before either. So
Yeah.
all these are kind of bucket list things I'm checking off my list. And so I started writing a book because and the whole purpose of the talk, really, Gary, is that I believe in it to my core, to my soul, but I also wanted to leave a lasting legacy
Yeah.
to my kids. We have 3 still relatively young kids, or they're 13, 17, and 20. Of course, back then they were each a year younger, so there would have
Yeah.
been 12, 16, and 19. So I wanted to leave a legacy for them. And the same with my book. I wanted to put something in print that they could reference if they ever were to look at it, that if I have grandchildren someday, they could reference. I
Yeah.
even decided on my book that I wanted to do an audiobook, and I wanted to narrate it myself, which I did. And that
Yeah.
was an incredible process. I loved every minute of that.
Yeah.
So the audiobook is actually on Audible.
Yeah.
And this way they can hear my voice. So one day when
Yes.
I'm long gone, they have my voice narrating the book to look back on. And
Yeah.
I thought that would be a nice thing to do. So, I kind of get a little bit more emotional about these things as I get a little bit older. I mean,
Yeah.
having just turned 40 a couple days ago, right? I'm just kidding. But as one gets a little bit older, you start looking at the totality of your life,
Yeah.
and what you're leaving behind and your legacy to your children. You see the fact that we are all mortal, and we have that mortality to face, and
Mhm.
we don't know. I mean, God willing, I'll be around another 30 years, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if I'll be around tomorrow. So,
Yeah.
so I'm just kind of looking ahead, and that's kind of what stimulated all of this, truly.
Yeah. That ability to take your life experience, figure out how you want to package that, process that, communicate that, use it for good, and then the legacy. I mean, it's the full gambit of everything that you have there. And I loved what you said just in terms of, potential future grandchildren would be able to hear your voice. I never really put the audio book together in terms of that legacy factor, because I just listen to the author and you go, okay, that's a thing. And it reminds me of my son. He's 15, and he never listens to a podcast that I do. He never reads a blog that I do. He just kind of goes, that's what my dad does. I think that's a thing. So it would be good at some point to kind of in some way do something along the same lines. I mean, he's observing and he's seeing the work that goes into it and the preparation and the love that I have for it, so there's that influential factor that's just there. But in terms of his ability to absorb it and understand it and appreciate it in the moment, that's pretty much zero for right now. So you might listen back to this at some point in the future and say, "Oh yeah, I maybe should have listened to one or two more." I don't know, but anyway. So you kind of talked about this in doing your bio when we were chatting earlier, and you delayed gratification is your TEDx talk that was ranked number 3 globally. And what do you believe? Obviously a lot of this is from personal experience and what your parents endured to get you to get the whole family to a spot where you had options and opportunity that you wouldn't have had they not made that significant decision. What do you believe makes this topic so impactful? And how do you believe that others can harness delayed gratification as a superpower towards success?
Well, Gary, I think part of the reason that the delayed gratification resonates so deeply, it kind of addresses what I consider to be a universal struggle.
Mhm.
So, there's always a tension between short-term pleasure and long-term success. And we now live in a world, unlike perhaps when you and I grew up, that's increasingly driven by instant gratification, right? Convenience, speed, immediate rewards are always within arm's reach, whether it be Amazon or DoorDash or what have you. And people are constantly battling distractions that prevent them from focusing on larger, more meaningful goals. So I think that the ability to pause, to resist temptation, and to invest in the future, in our own future, it's not only counterintuitive in today's environment, but I think it's immensely powerful.
Mhm.
So, so, so being so impactful, I think it has the ability to transform lives across all areas, right? I mean, you name it. I mean, you can apply delayed gratification to our education, to our careers, to our relationship, personal growth, to our finances. I mean, the list goes on and on. So, in my own journey, as we've already talked about, coming to the United States as a refugee, committing years of training to become an ophthalmologist and cosmetic surgeon, excuse me, is, proof, at least to me, and hopefully to others, that self-discipline, resilience, and the ability to wait for long-term rewards really creates a foundation for true success.
Mhm.
And ultimately, it's what I have coined as my Cuban triad, which I talked about recently at Cambridge University. And that Cuban triad is self-discipline, resilience, and delayed gratification.
Yeah.
And that's at my core. That's what I believe in. That's what's gotten me to where I am in life. And I'm just sold on it. No one can talk me out of it.
Yeah, and it sounds like from what you were sharing earlier too, that this was instilled in you from a young age, where you're saying, I am, you worked harder in high school than you did in medical school because there was a reason, there was a rationale, there was something that you were doing that you thought was going to be a means to an end, which essentially it was because you had opportunity in abundance when you left to be able to pick a path. And so, I mean, it's literally from your life journey that you've got that, and that's what I get from when we get an opportunity to chat. So, can you share like a pivotal moment from the book that has resonated with most readers in terms of feedback that you've received thus far?
Yeah, so I mean, there's several pivotal moments, but I think the most basic and obvious one is something we've already talked about, which is for my parents to make that extremely difficult choice to escape, the political turmoil in Castro's communism, and to make really what some would consider a dangerous and unknown decision to leave everything behind for the hope of a better future for our family, and in particular for me, because my parents, I must say, were throughout my upbringing, they've always been very selfless. They've always sacrificed for me. I mean, they'd rather put clothes on my back and be walking around with clothes with holes on their back.
Yeah.
They were very, very selfless people. So again, I'm quite blessed for that. But this journey that they undertook, it's really the crux of the whole delayed gratification, to come to a country not knowing the language, not having the economic means, having to start more than from scratch, having to start at a negative, And you're not
Yeah.
even starting at baseline, you're starting at a negative, working, my father's case, working full-time, 2 full-time jobs. In my mother's case, she had already had incredible education. She was already had her doctorate in education, which back then in the 60s for a female was not very common.
Yeah.
And she had studied at the University of Havana, that was a very well-known, reputable university. But here, coming to the United States, she had to start all over again. I mean, all over again in a foreign language. And
Yeah.
it's mind-blowing to me. I mean, I know the story, I know it's my life, but if I were them and the roles were reversed and I had to do all of that, my gosh, I don't know, would I have made the same choices? I don't know if I would have the internal fortitude
Yeah.
to do what they did,
Yeah.
because not everyone did. Not everyone did. I mean, when they left Cuba, they had family members, extended family members, not super close, but they had extended family members who made the conscious decision to stay in Cuba
Yeah.
because they did not want to take those risks.
Yeah.
So not everyone fled Cuba. I mean, a lot of people did, and a
Yeah.
lot of people still are fleeing Cuba to this day that we're talking,
Yeah.
but not everyone is willing to take that risk because it's a huge unknown. And clearly, if you fail at that risk, it's going to be a mammoth failure.
Yeah.
But but in life, this is another thing I try and preach about, that in life, I think we have to be balanced risk takers, right? If we try and avoid taking risks and always take the safe approach, the easy approach, we're not going to get that big gain, that big return in the end. I mean, you got to be willing to take the risks, and sometimes those risks are not going to pay off. Sometimes you're going to fail, and that's okay. But it has to be a conscious, balanced risk where you're really weighing the pros and the cons. I'm not suggesting gambling your life away, or I'm not suggesting a gambling attitude. There's a difference between risk taking and gambling, right? They're very big difference.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking in any way, shape, or form of gambling. I'm talking about taking methodical risk to get ahead in the hopes of that bigger, greater reward in the future. And that's what delayed gratification is. It's resisting the urge and temptation for that immediate reward or that safety net, and instead waiting it out, pausing, reflecting, making conscious decisions in terms of that later, often greater reward.
Yeah.
That's the best way, in my view, to summarize it.
Yeah, I love that. And inherent within that, there's intention. The intention to make those decisions, the intention to use all the data that you have, the intention to make an open, have an open, conscious conversation with yourself to help you make the best decision, the next best step for you going forward. And that might be outside your comfort zone. It might involve the risk that you just discussed there, but it's done with the wherewithal of everything that you have at your disposal at a given point in time. Yeah, it's really the intention part is really shining through. So how have self-discipline, resilience, and delayed gratification influenced your personal and professional life? And how can others develop those traits for their own betterment?
Well, I think it's really setting up the proper mental mindset and attitude, right? I mean, the first way is watch both of my TEDx talks, and
100%.
hopefully maybe you'll get a little inspiration on both delayed gratification as well as the what I call the obsession advantage to unprecedented success, which is trying to shift the paradigm, Gary, from what we normally think of as obsession in a negative connotation, right? We think of it as a psychiatric disease, as having obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about developing that obsession, which is basically being passionate. I mean, being passionate and being Cuban, I'm passionate, right? Cubans, another stereotype, which is absolutely true. Cubans, you won't find very many Cubans who aren't passionate. And I'm passionate about anything and everything that I do.
Yeah.
And so when you're passionate about your goals and desires, that's what I'm referring to as obsession. Resilience, yeah. I mean, you have to have the resilience, as we talked about earlier, to persevere. You got to be able to persevere. You got to be able to embrace those failures, learn from them, not let it keep you down, but rather step forward, bounce forward, and push to your next goal. So it's really a paradigm shift and a mindset that we all have the power to change within ourselves.
Yeah.
The key is, will we do it?
Yeah.
And so often is the case that, it's easy to get in your comfort zone and just not change anything, right? It's just like, for example, I'll give you a silly example. I mean, what I've been doing this last year, right? Whether it be the TEDx talks, whether it be the book, whether it be giving speeches or talks. I mean, these are all things that, I really don't have to do. I could just sit back and watch football all weekend and do nothing else, right? I mean, I love football. I could do that, but I've made a conscious decision, Gary. I've made a conscious decision that I've got to do some other things. My journey is not over in this life.
Yeah.
And even though I'm still practicing medicine and practicing my ophthalmology and cosmetic surgery, I still have other things I want to accomplish, and that I want to help not just my family, but the world at large, if they're willing to listen. For those who are willing to listen, but not everyone is, and that's okay. That's what makes the world turn. But so it's incumbent upon each one of us to change our own mind, to develop that attitude, to shift the paradigm, and to strive for bigger, greater things in our journey, regardless of who we are. You don't have to be a doctor. You don't have to be a lawyer. You could be a steel worker like my dad was. It doesn't matter. He had dreams and goals. They were different than mine. But I'm very, very proud of what my father was able to do for his family. So, it applies universally. These are universal concepts that doesn't matter what your upbringing, what your background, what your ethnicity, and this is why I preach that lack of being that special person is not really an obstacle to success. We don't have to be that gifted person or the person that's born with a golden spoon inside of us. We all can achieve the level of success that we desire.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you were talking there, what really came up for me is the ability to be able to shape your own future, the ability to be able to sit down and have that honest, open conversation with yourself to say, what does self-discipline mean to me, for me? What does resilience mean to and for me? What does delayed gratification mean to and for me? So it's not being imposed upon you. It's not something that's happening to you where you're, willingly or unwillingly kind of taking or charting a path. You can have that conversation with yourself with the reality of who you are, who you want to be, what the gap between those two things, if there is a gap, and then move forward. So I love that individuality to it. And then it goes back to setting the intention, is this what I want to be doing with my life? What does that mean for me today, tomorrow, next time? How do I get to lean into that? How do I get to build onto that? How do I get to communicate that to other people and then move forward from there? So there's a real sense of ownership, I think is probably the best way that I could put it. Would that be fair to say that there's a lot of it inherently?
Absolutely. And as one does lean into it, I think that it's also important to recognize that, success in whatever chosen area that we're speaking of, success typically does not come overnight, right? Maybe on rare occasions, maybe winning the lottery or something, but success typically doesn't come overnight. So I think on the one hand, we do have to set goals that are high enough. Because so often is the case that I think many of us, including myself at times, have set goals that are actually beneath us, that should be much higher. So setting high goals, but along the way, there have to be kind of smaller, more tangible goals, like little milestones that we achieve that we can celebrate. And celebrate doesn't mean, oh, you're going to have a big old party necessarily, but you celebrate them, and you celebrate them emotionally. You give yourself praise and accolades that you've achieved this.
Yeah.
And that in turn gives positive energy and positive feedback to get to the next level. So
Yeah.
it's like walking upstairs. You may want to go to the top of the tower, but to get there, you got to take a number of steps. And each time you get to the next floor,
Yeah.
then that's a celebration, and celebrate it, and then use that as energy to then go to the next floor above that.
Yeah.
So I think, just for your viewers to understand that it's a process, and you can't speed it up too quickly. I mean, it typically doesn't work that way. That's where the whole patience and self-discipline and perseverance comes in.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a lesson, as you said earlier, in today's age of instant gratification. I do not want to wait or have to wait for almost anything that's coming my way. You end up in a situation where what does the journey look like? Well, the journey is, if you study well enough and hard enough and you work hard enough and you put yourself in these positions that will give you more exposure to do this. Maybe in 4 or 5 years you could do that. Before you even got the sentence out, with many people today, they would be like, wait, did you say what? Did you say 4 or 5 years? But then, as you said, building in the micro milestones, the opportunities to get that pause, to say, good for you. I did it. Look where I am. Take a look behind you. Look how far we've come. Look how far we've come. We're closer to the other side than we were when we started. And those opportunities to truly celebrate, be buoyed by the progress, essentially, but enjoy and immerse yourself in the journey. Getting there, that's the gold dust for me, is those
Right.
opportunities to truly do that. And I don't know that people truly map it out in a way that would be meaningful for them to be able to do just that, to just enjoy the journey and see and feel the progress, even if it's not as much as you were hoping at a given point in time. I'm closer now than I was before I started. I'm doing
Right.
something that's serving and set out for me, and I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to tell as many people as I feel like telling, and I'm going to, really genuinely build myself into that. There's so much greatness in that, and it sounds simple, but if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. To your
Right.
point,
Right. For
everyone
sure. For sure.
everyone
Yeah.
should be doing it, but for whatever reason, people don't choose that path.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more, Gary. I mean, I think it is key to enjoy that journey, right? It's
Yeah,
not simply about the destination. You have to enjoy the steps and embrace it and have fun with it. But it's an easier conversation, I think, for you and I to have, because we've been on this earth longer, and we have
yeah,
a certain level of wisdom and experience behind us, right?
yeah,
When we're talking to our teenage kids, like you mentioned, your 15-year-old son, and I have my 13-year-old daughter, 17 and 20-year-old sons, and I talk about this, and they acknowledge it on the surface,
yeah,
but yet I hear them talking about, oh, they want to get done with school right away. Should I go to college? Should I not go to college? What is college anyway? I can make as much right now as I would going to college, and it's all about this instant gratification. They don't understand, just because of their age, right? I mean, you
yeah,
can't really fault them for it, because they haven't experienced life. I mean, in their mind, they think they've experienced life,
yeah,
but really, we learn through our own experiences and through our wisdom.
yeah,
And now's the time. I mean, certainly, I would advocate going to college if you have the ability.
yeah,
Although there are other ways of achieving goals, and there's trade schools, et cetera, et cetera. So college isn't for everyone. But I do think that when they're young like this, if they fail, it's a lot easier to kind of bounce back from that and not have it have a huge impact on your overall life. So now perhaps is the time, if some of your viewers are younger generation, teenagers in their 20s even,
yeah,
that's okay. To be a little bit more of a risk taker, perhaps even than what I preach.
Yeah.
I by my own nature, I mean, I've always been a risk taker, but not a crazy one.
Yeah.
So I think when you're young, yeah, take some risk, have a few more extra failures because you'll definitely learn from it. And then when
Yeah.
you're 30 or 35 or 40, hopefully you'll be grounded and you'll understand
Yeah.
what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
But when you're, our age, and I know you're younger than me, but still I consider you in my generation more or less,
Yeah.
that at our age, it's easier to understand these concepts because we've lived it.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I talk to Leo often about saying there are lessons that you need to learn. Absolutely, you need to learn them on your own because it's your journey. You have to go through that on your own. But there are some lessons that you don't need to learn. That's when you listen to your dad. That's when just take my advice, please. But I know that ultimately, from a human level, he does have to do it. He does have to make his own path, chart his own path, make his own mistakes. The good thing about him, he's such a refreshingly honest kid that afterwards he would be like, you know what, you said that, and you said it again, and you said it again. I went and did it anyway. And now I know what you mean, so that I'll have a wee bit more trust and faith in what you're saying going forward. But as you say, it's not their fault. He's kind of thinking there's certain things this old man can teach me, but most of it he's not living my life, and it's true to a point, But I'd just love that that, right, Dad, please tell me what this means, what I should do, what do you think? And then lean into whatever it is he decides to do. We don't have many of those, I have to say, because he's too busy living on his own journey, which is great to see. It's great to be a part
Right,
of as
right.
well.
Totally get
So
it.
yeah, exactly. So then you're a husband, you're a father, you're an author, you're a speaker, you are a doctor and you're still practicing. That's a lot of demands on your time and on your life. How do you manage all of that in with being a human being at the same time? What's your work-life balance traits or tricks?
Wow, that's a difficult question, Gary. Uh, I will readily admit that throughout much of my prior career, my work life, it probably wasn't a true work-life balance. I was really keyed in on work.
Mm,
Now, at this stage of my career, I kind of look at the work aspect of just kind of being on autopilot,
mm,
and I do what I enjoy doing. I come to work. My schedule has evolved over the years, where all I do now is two days of surgical consultations and 3 days all day of surgery, and that's my week. But it's an exhausting week.
yeah,
But but in terms of this work-life balance currently, again, I don't know. I'm just crazy or driven. I don't know. I mean, I wonder what my wife thinks at times because I look forward to the weekend and having some time with the family, and then I find myself in my den, working and writing and doing all these things. So I really don't stop. I mean, there's very little time that I'm doing nothing other than watching a little college football, which I don't know if you appreciate it up there in Canada, but in the United States, college football is pretty popular. And
the big deal.
being a University of Michigan alumnus, I'm pretty proud of the Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah,
So yeah, so my work-life balance, I don't think honestly is as balanced as it should be if I were to be truthful about it.
yeah,
But I enjoy my life. I don't mind working. I never have. I have the self-discipline and always have. My parents never had to tell me to sit down and study. I mean, it just came naturally. I just wanted. I devoted time to my work, to my studies,
mm,
and now I devote time on the weekends to my other passions that I'm trying to work on and develop. And then we try and do some family vacations, which have been uh, very, very exhilarating. And we've been blessed to have the opportunity to go to some pretty exotic destinations. So that's kind of the R&R, the rest and relaxation
yeah.
in the Justo household.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. This has been a great conversation. Before I let you go, Dr. Justo, where can people find out more about you?
Well, the easiest thing to do is to go to my personal website. I have a personal website that's dremiliojusto.com, and that's spelled DREMILIOJUSTO.com. And on that website, there are links to all my various talks, the TEDx talks. There's a link to Amazon for the book. The book's available not just in Amazon, but as I mentioned, it's available through Audible, the audiobook.
Yeah.
It's available through all major retailers like Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart. There's also a contact page on the website whereby any questions or comments will come directly to me. I'm extremely efficient about answering them. So I usually answer the same day, and in rare cases the next day.
Yeah.
So people can contact me through the website and look at everything that I'm doing outside of the office.
Yeah, I love it. This has been incredible. It's been great to get to know more about your journey, great to hear some of your philosophies, and great to see what you've got on the go for right now. I can't wait to see what happens for you in the future. Thanks very much for your time, Dr. Justo.
Thank you, Gary. It's been a pleasure and delight to get to know you as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Hello again. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode, and I do hope that you found it valuable and gained some insights. I do have an ask for you. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would absolutely love it if you would connect with me on my socials, and that's at LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search for my name and do whatever it is you need to do there to follow me and stay updated with all the latest content, tips, and discussions. And for any more resources that you're looking for, feel free to visit my website, garygillen.com. And while you're there, you can book a free, no obligation 30-minute coaching call directly with me through the site. Whether you're looking to enhance your performance or tackle a new challenge, I'm absolutely here to help you succeed, and I would absolutely love to hear from you. Thanks very much again, and until next time, keep pushing towards your goals and getting better each and every day, my friend.